So, what happens when the prison bars are gone, but the sentence? Well, it never actually ends. That's the huge question we're diving into today as we break down the inner prison. It's an incredibly powerful chapter from Dr. Siegfried Castell Britton's book, Dangerous Minds, and it's all about a kind of confinement that exists entirely in the mind. You know, Dr. Britton opens the chapter with that one haunting line. He paints this picture of a prison where the heat, the smell of iron and sweat, this intense stillness, it all creates an atmosphere so heavy it feels like a physical weight. But the real confinement, he argues, isn't the walls at all, it's the silence. And that right there is the core concept he builds on, the inner prison. It's not a place you're in, it's a state of being. He has this line where he says, "Inside, time does not flow, it thickens." It's a place where your past isn't just a memory you recall, it's a constant living presence. The punishment stops being this external thing and starts just echoing inside your own mind.
So, this is the first crucial idea Dr. Britton gets into, that at some point, for some inmates, confinement forces this kind of unavoidable self-confrontation. It stops being about being held captive and starts being about having to face yourself in that crushing silence.
And this is where he draws a really important line in the sand. He argues there's this huge difference between just punishment, which, contains the body and focuses on the act, and what he calls true restoration. Restoration is aiming for something so much bigger. It's about actually trying to transform the mind by pushing for understanding and focusing on the whole person, not just the worst thing they ever did. And this story just illustrates that point perfectly. Dr. Britton tells us about Elena, an inmate in the Cayman Islands. For weeks, she was just completely defiant. But then, she heard another woman's story of trauma, and she finally broke down, and she said this. Her real sentence wasn't the years she had to serve, it was this profound, crushing sense of disconnection from her own worth. That's the moment punishment truly became a mirror for her. Okay, but what happens if someone tries to ignore that inner mirror? What if they just refuse to look? Well, this is where Dr. Britton's next idea comes in. He basically argues that even if you try to suppress your conscience, your own memory has a form of justice, and it's one that attacks you through your senses. He actually has this fascinating term for it, moral reviviscence. The idea is that guilt can just ambush you, not as a thought, but through your senses. A random sound, a smell, and it triggers the memory, and the full moral weight of what you did just comes flooding back, whether you want it to or not. Exactly, and the story he uses for this is just chilling. It's about a man who served time for homicide, and he was absolutely terrified of silence. He said the sound of the gun from his crime would just return to him in dreams and quiet moments. And his description is so powerful. It wasn't only a sound outside, it was a sound inside. His conscience had become an echo he literally couldn't shut off. So, if the problem is this internal echo of guilt, what's the solution? This brings us to what I think is the absolute core of Dr. Britton's entire argument: repair. He proposes that real justice isn't about punishment or guilt alone. It requires building a bridge of understanding between the very people the crime tore apart. And this isn't just a nice metaphor, he says it's a neurological reality. Dr. Britton points out that trauma can activate the exact same parts of the brain for both the victim and the offender. One of them fears remembering, the other fears being remembered. As he puts it, they both remain prisoners of the same event until understanding builds a bridge between them. It's incredible. And he gives us an unbelievable example from a restorative session in Medellin. A woman, whose home was destroyed in a robbery, came face to face with the man responsible. The man was just frozen, silent. And she looked right at him and said these words. In that moment, Dr. Britton writes, the man's whole face just broke, as if he finally truly understood. Justice stopped being about punishment, and it became about a shared humanity. So, after this deep internal reckoning, and this potential for some kind of external understanding, Dr. Britton lays out the final and maybe most crucial step: transforming all that painful awareness into a new purpose. Yeah, he really maps out this journey through the stories of people like Juan and Camila, and you can see the progression so clearly. First, you have to acknowledge the depth of the pain, not just yours, but the victim's. Then comes taking real responsibility, not just lip service. And that's followed by transforming that memory from a source of shame into a source of learning. And finally, using that lesson to find a new positive purpose. Yeah, take Juan's story. After he went through this whole journey himself, he started visiting schools. And he wasn't there to preach. He just told his story, explaining the simple, painful truth of how much it hurts to be wrong. He literally transformed his own history into a tool to prevent others from making the same mistake. And Camila's path, it was quieter, but it was just as powerful. She joined a support circle, and at first, she only listened. But eventually, she started to share her own story, not to erase the damage, but to transform it into guidance for other people. As she put it, "When they move forward, I feel I move with them." Her repair came through that shared empathy. And this quote from Juan just ties it all together, doesn't it? This is the ultimate goal of what Dr. Britton calls his identity restoration theory. It's that final realization that true accountability isn't about just enduring punishment. It's about actively creating meaning and value from your deepest failures. So, we've followed this entire journey, from the inner prison of guilt all the way to the freedom of purpose. And that leads us directly into the next chapter, the crime mirror, where Dr. Britton kind of zooms out and asks what all of this reflects back on us, on our society. And this is the question that just hangs in the air at the end of chapter 5. If these inner prisons are shaped by silence and by disconnection and this lack of understanding, then we have to ask ourselves, what role does our society play in building those initial walls, long before any physical crime is ever even committed? It's a massive question, and it's one we're going to start to unpack in our next explainer when we tackle Chapter 6. Of course, to go even deeper into all these incredible stories, we highly, highly recommend getting Dr. Siegfried Castell Britton's book, Dangerous Minds. You can find it on Amazon. We'll see you for the next part of the journey.